Ever since I watched the original Halloween, I gained an understanding and appreciation for the simplistic story it presented. It's one of the many reasons I'm so critical of the sequels. I know it sounds counterintuitive as a Michael Myers fan to say that we should have had less of Myers in certain cases. With that said, hear me out. I would say that there are few franchises that benefit from doing the same thing over and over. One example is Friday the 13th, a franchise that took a lot of inspiration from Halloween. For F-13, it's a simple and entertaining formula, with crappy characters, modern exploitation, and a legendary icon that defined an entire decade of cinema. The thing is that those elements don't work for Halloween, at least for me. While it set the modern standard for our slasher films and countless films began imitating it, Halloween would eventually begin to imitate the imitators. The idea of the franchise being an anthology series was the best thing the franchise could do. If they had done it properly, we could have seen an eventual legendary return of Michael Myers. Instead, Michael Myers is like that drunk uncle that comes by every Christmas, dressed as Santa Claus that gives you all the shitty presents. My point in saying all of that is that we ended up getting too much Michael Myers, and it got to the point where he wasn't scary anymore. As we'll soon see, Michael Myers gets a backstory to explain why he does all the killing. Just like I said in my Halloween 2 review, seeing Michael way too much or seeing some dumb schmucks dress up like him too much lessens the fear of his presence. Imagine if in Predator we got that awesome reveal of the creature earlier in the film. It would have taken the fear factor away from the rest of the film because it's like, oh, that's it? That's what it looks like? And that very logic can be applied to the entire franchise. So much so that there were three reboots in the series. The first was the H2O timeline, which ignored 4 through 6. Then we had the Rob Zombie films, which remade the entire series with 2 films. And now we have the Blumhouse trilogy, which ignores everything past the first film and retcons the ending of the first. To say that we haven't seen an oversaturation of Michael Myers is ignoring the very franchise that's been created over the years. And look, if you love seeing Michael Myers as much as you see Jason Voorhees with a new entry almost every year, that's fine. For me, it's blatant and obvious why this series has gone downhill. What once was Halloween became a ripoff of Friday the 13th. With that all said, let's actually get into this review, shall we? One good thing I'll say about this movie is that the mask looks leagues better than 4's. It still looks a little off, but it's a hell of a lot closer to the original mask. The performance is also decent. Michael does feel more scary here, which is nice, though this does get a little ruined towards the end of the film, but we'll talk about that later. So the movie picks up where part 4 left off, with Michael falling through a shaft. I think it's a mine shaft. We get a small recap of what happened previously, and they sort of do it Rocky style, with them reusing some of the ending scene. Though this time the cops throw what looks like a stick of dynamite down there to finish Michael off. Wow. What an explosive beginning, huh? That was a nice touch, but as expected, Michael escapes and he flows downriver. He eventually comes across a homeless guy and Michael just passes out. And for the next year, Michael will be unconscious. And you know what? I'm glad they didn't have the movie stay on the same night. This aspect of having the sequel take place on the same night is something I really don't like too much because it doesn't leave much room for the story to grow. With that said, Michael eventually wakes up a year later on Halloween Eve, and the same stuff happens again. He goes around killing people and continues his hunt for Jamie. And speaking of Jamie, this is where they sort of pissed away an interesting opportunity. You see, part 4 ended with Jamie apparently killing her stepmother, and it left open a chance for the subsequent sequels to focus on Jamie as a killer, inheriting her uncle's curse. But it wasn't meant to be, as we focus back on Michael. And it really is a shame though, because the story could have been interesting. Having the focus be on an adult Jamie could have presented some different story points, and maybe even show us the Cult of Thorn utilizing the Michael Myers curse or something. Regardless, Jamie is in a children's clinic, and she continues to have reoccurring nightmares of Michael. This goes a step further by showing us that Jamie and Michael are connected telepathically somehow. Every time Michael is about to kill someone, Jamie starts spazzing out. She can even see what Michael sees to some degree. And this is an interesting idea, and it's also a bit familiar too. Horror fans might see some resemblance to the movie Pumpkinhead, where Lance Henriksen's character is connected to the Pumpkinhead monster every time it kills someone. So it's nice to see at least that the filmmakers be a little bit more creative with some of this stuff. Compared to the first film, we didn't do too much different with the franchise, so at least this one tried. This is also the point where the franchise introduces a new narrative that really flat out ruins Michael as a character. You see, throughout the film, we've been seeing this symbol pop up. We see it first on Michael's wrist in the beginning of the movie, and then we see it pop up here and there. We also get the introduction of a mysterious character dubbed the Man in Black. Basically, he's this random guy that's always shrouded in darkness and wearing a black trench coat, a black fedora, and black boots with spurs that clink and clank as he walks. And this guy also has the mysterious symbol on his wrist. In concept, this was pretty interesting. At the time, there wasn't any explanation as to who this guy was and why he was so important to the story. That is until the end of the film, but more on that in a bit. Dr. Loomis is back, as usual, and doing what he usually does, though at a certain point in the movie he tries to reason with Michael, which is really odd considering he knows that there was nothing but blank inside of Michael. And this is where I start to dislike the direction they begin taking with Michael. You see, every film up until now has presented Michael as an unstoppable force of destruction. He's kind of like a hurricane, and he's not human, he has no emotion, he is the shape. But this movie mixes that up. For most of the movie, Michael is as we always know him to be. But at the end of the film, they do a complete 180. First off, Loomis talks to Michael about his inner rage about killing his family, which is really off because, again, Michael has no visible emotion. But what's going on here is that they are making known in some small way who is really pulling Michael's strings and why Michael kills in the first place. But it gets even worse when Michael and Jamie are together and Jamie calls him uncle. He takes his mask off and he starts shedding tears. What? First of all, Michael was burned to a crisp in Halloween 2. And on top of that, his eyes got shot out. So, how in God's name does his face and eyes look completely normal? And why is he crying? What the hell is going on here? Michael showing emotion makes about as much sense as Danner letting go of his hatred for giraffes. None of this makes any sense. And that's not all. What the hell happened to the Myers house? I mean, Jesus Christ, it looks like it was designed by a medieval architect, and later Poison Ivy showed up and had a mass plant party. And believe it or not, the worst is yet to come. At this point, nobody really gives a shit about the continuity in this series. Michael's different, the house is different, and somehow he still has his skin and hair intact after being engulfed in flames. After Michael reveals his face to Jamie, they almost embrace, but then Michael snaps out of it and tries to kill her. Loomis shows up and uses Jamie as bait to lure Michael into a trap. Loomis then drops a chain net on Michael, shoots him with a few tranquilizer darts, and starts beating him with a piece of wood. And the cherry on top is as Loomis is hitting Michael, he's shouting, "Die!" And the way he does it is very similar to how Tommy Jarvis killed Jason in Friday the 13th Part 4.
Die! 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 Michael! Die! Die! Die!
The next scene takes place at the police station, and we see that Michael's chained up in a cell. Everything seems normal. Jamie takes one final look at him, and she leaves with a police officer. But then, all of a sudden, we see the Man in Black show up. Then there's an explosion inside the station, and the Man in Black starts shooting up the place. And this part really reminds me of the shootout from the first Terminator, just a little bit. Afterwards, Jamie walks back into the police station and sees Michael is gone. So the shape is on the loose again, and we fade to black. Well, I guess we should have expected Michael to escape. It's nothing new for this franchise. Of course, we won't get an explanation for the Man in Black or the mysterious symbol until the next film. I'd sum up this movie as a mix of good and bad. There are some redeeming features, but with that said, this movie, like all the other sequels, reinforces what I've been saying about this franchise all along. And it's a real shame because they could have utilized the anthology aspect as well as the cult aspect with Michael in it. In fact, in the next review, I'll give my idea for how this series could have gone if it utilized some of these aspects properly. So overall, Halloween 5, The Revenge of Michael Myers is just another generic slasher film with some interesting aspects and more of the same stuff we've come to expect of this genre. Which, if that's what you like, then you'll probably enjoy this movie a lot. For me, I hold the original Halloween to such a high standard because of its simplicity with the genre it was in. But nothing can ever truly remain the same, I suppose. Anyways, stay tuned next week for the finale of the Thorn Trilogy with Halloween, The Curse of Michael Myers. And oh boy, will this be a shit show to dive into. And thank you all for tuning in once again. We really appreciate the support. A special thank you goes out to Mother Mulder and Kyle Curtis Flett, part of the Dark Ether Files Patreon. If you want to support us further and get access to some exclusive content, the link is in the description. And with that all being said, thank you all very much for watching, listening, and supporting. And as always, my fellow investigators, remember, the entertainment is out there.
I'm Special Agent Spooky Clutter.
I'm Special Agent Carter Sauce.
Special Agent Dr. Richtofen.
And until next time, fellow investigators, remember.
The entertainment
The entertainment
is out there.